Good morning, people. Finished a book, The Desert Queen, subtitled The Extraordinary Life of Gertrude Bell, Adventurer, Advisor to Kings, Ally of Lawrence of Arabia. And we visited Lawrence of Arabia in A Peace to End All Peace. So Lawrence of Arabia, I'm afraid, wasn't all he was cracked up to be. There was a little bit of exaggeration. And this book doesn't really make Lawrence seem to be this king of the Arabs, you know. But this woman was born in England, born to a pretty rich family, and she was just driven. Before she went to the Middle East, she was a mountain climber and tackled some of the highest mountains in Europe. She was quite the accomplished woman. Her personal life may not have turned out exactly the way she wanted it to. She was in love like 3 times. Wanted to marry all 3 of these guys. It never worked out. One of them died of pneumonia. That was the first one. Her father forbade her to marry this guy because he didn't have enough money. And the second one was killed at Gallipoli. Portions of this book take place during the First World War and immediately after the First World War. I think it ends in 1925. She actually commits suicide. She's still busy and outwardly she appears to be enjoying her work, but her work is fading off and she doesn't have as much to do, and she ends up taking an overdose of sleeping pills. It's a pretty interesting book. It took me like less than a week to finish, and this was pieces of the puzzle about what was going on there at that time. So I needed to read this. Many books that I've read have referenced Gertrude Bell, and so I needed to read this. I don't have a whole lot of notes. This was published in 1996, 377 pages. The author is Janet Wallach, and my next note is that there is A Peace to End All Peace. Gertrude figures sort of prominently in that book. They claim that she's an atheist. Let's see, that's the 4th paragraph, page 47. I don't really know. She doesn't write like an atheist. She mentions God and she mentions fate, and most atheists are kind of careful about what they say. They don't want to be looked at like a hypocrite. The rites and rituals of the pilgrims fascinated her, and on a January day she rode down to the Jordan River to find an enormous crowd of people waiting to be baptized. Desert Arabs, Arab peasants, workers and servants, Turkish soldiers, Greek priests, and Russian peasants wearing fur coats and high boots, all standing in the hot sun, wearing chains of beads and crucifixes around their necks. Amazed by this fervor and their ability to ignore the thick garments even in the broiling heat, Gertrude walked among them, photographing as she went. Then, after half an hour, a procession of priests holding lighted candles filed to the water's edge. The crowd of people clambered down the muddy banks and stood in water up to their waists. When the priests laid the cross 3 times on the water, guns went off, and everyone baptized himself by dipping and rolling over in the water. It was the strangest sight, she observed. I mean, that sounds like something an atheist would say, because religious fervor just looks bizarre to atheists. And I count myself among them. Mountain climbing, I've already mentioned that. Middle of 2nd paragraph, page 81. want it there. So I'll just read the whole thing. For more than 60 years, English women have been gaining the right to vote. First, for local boards administering money to the poor. Then for school boards, municipal leaders, county councils, in effect, choosing the people who represented their interests as wives and mothers. Issues of local scope. That was enough. Demands for universal suffrage were brusquely turned aside. Queen Victoria herself had written in 1870, "This mad, wicked folly of women's rights, a subject which makes the Queen so furious that she cannot contain herself." Kind of odd that a queen would be against women's rights, but Gertrude herself campaigned against it, so I don't know. Yeah, we do. We know about people getting involved against their own best interests. And love twice, I've already talked about that. Second paragraph, page 152, the Saudis. This is, right after the First World War, and the Saudis are there in the middle of all this, the family of the Saud. And, of course, that's where Saudi Arabia comes from. Second paragraph. The negotiations with the Sharif have been very skillfully conducted, Gertrude wrote knowingly to Lord Robert Cecil. Indeed, so skillful were they that the precise extent of British promises to the Sharif became the subject of bitter controversy for many years between Arab nationalists and British colonialists. But Gertrude was concerned about the Sharif Hussein. From all the information that comes in, he seems to have acquired a very remarkable position in Arabia, but his strength is moral, not military, she argued, and suggested that Hussein's rival, Ibn Saud, should also be drawn to the British side. At her insistence, and upon the advice of others, the British put Saud on the payroll at almost £10,000 a month. By the end of the war, he would defeat Rashid at Hayil, and by 1925 he would dethrone Sharif Hussein and rule all of Arabia. Bottom of 202 to 203. And that's it for my notes on it. I don't know why. At the end here, I just concentrated on finishing this book. I didn't take any more notes. I hate Mr. Balfour's Zionist pronouncement, Gertrude wrote venomously to her parents. And of course, she's talking about the Balfour Declaration. It's my belief that it can't be carried out. The country is wholly unsuited to the ends the Jews have in view. It is a poor land, incapable of great development, and with a solid 2/3 of its population Muslim Arabs, who look on Jews with contempt. To my mind, it's a wholly artificial scheme divorced from all relation to facts, and I wish it the ill success it deserves. And will get, I fancy. Part of her prediction came true. The troubles she forecast between Arabs and Jews was to continue for 5 generations, and not until almost the end of the 20th century did the people of Palestine, Jews and Arabs, recognize each other's right to exist on the same land. But the wholly artificial scheme of a Jewish national homeland did, in fact, become a reality. Indeed, Israel became the only democratic state in the Middle East. I take issue with some of the stuff at the end of that paragraph. It is not all roses between the Israelis and the Palestinians. Gertrude and much of the English, they were occupiers, were not in favor of the Balfour Declaration. That's it. Thanks for watching.